Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to June 6th, 2024. And this is another edition of the MSP Initiative at MSP Talk. And for everybody that usually follows us, we're going to do some housekeeping right here at the beginning of this session. And then we'll get into the good stuff. So here we go. MSPinitiative.com. If you don't know how to spell initiative, Google it. It'll give you the right spelling. Put it MSP in front of it and .com at the end, and you will get to this webpage. Here you will see sessions like this session right now is being very much recorded, and we will distribute it on our podcatchers and YouTube page and the sessions tab of MSPinitiative.com. Community Minds, we got one of these under our belt this year in Nashville, and next one is coming up in Denver. So if you go to the Community Minds tab of MSPinitiative.com, you will see we are holding another one in Denver, September 25th and 26th. Completely two-day educational event for you, hopefully the MSP community. We have both workshops and panels. And this is absolutely not a regular show with booths and trade show floor. This is all about learning, and more learning. So if you're after learning actual things rather than being pitched a topic with a credit card swipe at the end of it, this event could be for you. So that being said, check it out, MSP Community Minds, September 25th, 26th. But before we even get to Denver in September, you're going to get to Denver in June, as in next week. 2 block parties, and these are pretty much what we're famous for. We have a block party coming up next week on June 10th in conjunction with our good friends at PAX 8 for the PAX 8 Beyond Conference in Denver. So on the evening of June 10th, between 8:30 and midnight, we are holding a community block party. And yes, we will be shuttling people to and from the conference venue. And yes, we're going to have a great time because we have room to fit, I don't know, everybody and anybody at this event. So even if you're not going to PAX 8 Beyond, you happen to be in the greater Denver area and you're an MSP, join us because it costs you absolutely nothing to register. Please do so ahead of time. You'll see 2 registration links for MSPs and anyone that isn't an MSP. And thank you to all of our co-sponsoring vendors that are helping to put this together. It is not inexpensive, and but it is definitely a good time. So check that out. And then not 1, but 2 days after that, we are going to get right on over to the other side of the ocean and back to DattoCon Europe in Dublin. So on the evening of June 12th, we are transporting everyone to the absolutely amazing venue called the Camden. And we will be rolling till midnight again, or until you can't stand. No, just kidding. Please do always stand or sit, but stand comfortably. Same deal, 2 registration links. Anyone that's an MSP and anyone that isn't. Again, thank you to our co-sponsoring vendors who are making this one happen. You know, it takes a community to make these happen. They are absolutely amazing, and we hope to have a absolute blast. So those are the 2 community block parties. Denver first, June 10th, Dublin next, June 12th. We have some community offers, which are just deals from companies around the industry that you may or may not take advantage of. And then we have our industry calendar, which, as you can imagine, this month is very, very busy. And we try and keep track of several things happening out in the MSP IT community sphere and keep you up to date on what those dates are, just in case you feel like not being at home and surely not being at vacation and just using work travel as your excuse to vacation. And that is pretty honest, to be honest. That being said, that is all the housekeeping, and you can follow all of that at MSPinitiative.com and our YouTube page and our podcatcher and LinkedIn and Facebook and all the other good stuff. So there it all is. For the second time ever, we bring back today's guest on the podcast, Tim Fitzpatrick, who I will let him introduce himself if you didn't catch him on the first one. And then we'll get into all things marketing. Go for it, Tim.
Well, George, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. So super quick about me. I'm a marketing consultant, advisor, and outsourced or part-time marketing executive. So what does that mean? What do I do? I help MSPs build or update and then manage their marketing engine so they can get where they want to go faster. So I do that by focusing on 3 areas of marketing: strategy, planning, and leadership. Got to have all 3 if you want your marketing engine cranking. So that's where I live.
Awesome. Wow. One thing is for sure. marketing is, I feel like, almost a sour topic in MSP IT sandbox land.
Yeah.
If nothing other than tens and thousands and probably even more dollars have been invested. And I was just actually mentioning this to somebody in a different context, but still around marketing. And it's like, hey, listen, if you bring in somebody else to tell your story, likely the message that they create is not the message that you're trying to get out there. And for some reason, there's always that disconnect, or in many cases, there's that disconnect. So, but I have to acknowledge the fact that a lot of people who get into this business in technology land, I'm not going to say are the basement, man cave, kind of in the shadows kind of people, but maybe not the outgoing extroverted type person. And so there's a little bit of just uncomfortableness maybe in delivering the message. And so hence we get to the word marketing. However, I'm going to challenge you on this one. Marketing is part of sales. Yes or no?
I would say they're related.
Okay.
So marketing comes before sales, right? So to me, the job of marketing is getting someone who has a need or a problem you can solve to know, like, and trust you.
Mm-hmm.
That's what marketing is all about to me. And so if marketing is doing its job, you're getting warm leads that are coming in to the sales pipeline that are then being transferred to sales. So
Sure.
um, I don't necessarily see them as part of each other. I see them as complementary, and they go together,
Okay.
right? It's very difficult to have one without the other in some way, shape, or form.
Okay. So let me
That's
ask
how I
you.
think about it.
No. And that's why I'm challenging you, because I've run into many. How many times have you run in? We're all on LinkedIn. Manager of sales and marketing, director of sales and marketing, VP of sales and marketing. Why is sales and marketing the same person? Other than small businesses, right? And everybody wears a lot of hats. I get that,
Yeah.
but one likely leads to the other, right? Like, or
Yes.
one, like, can you plan one without the other? Is there supposed to be a disconnect? I don't know. I think there's got to be, I don't know. I'm a backwards waterfall guy, right? It's like, hey, I need to accomplish this goal as a company this month, this quarter, this year. And if this is what I'm trying to get to, everything that comes now backwards from it's supposed to lead me to my goal, right?
Yeah.
So if marketing's supposed to help generate opportunities, and opportunities lead to proposals, and proposals or quotes lead to my goal financially, like, there's an interconnect, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I look, I'm biased, but I think you it's very difficult to have one without the other. What I see a lot of MSPs in the MSP community, the sales and direct sales outreach is super common. It seems to be really ingrained in the industry. So it's not uncommon for me to talk to MSPs that are not doing a lot of marketing that have had a sales effort for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
I think your sales efforts are significantly more difficult without having marketing on the front end of it.
Okay. So, like, if are we talking about outbound efforts versus inbound? I'm not trying to get super classroom here, but, like, if I'm a sales rep, or if I'm somebody helping in the ability to generate, out, I'm making phone calls, I'm sending
Yeah.
emails, I'm sending postcards, I'm maybe getting in front of people literally in person, whether that's in an event or at a mixer, at a happy hour, or who knows? I'm
Yeah.
walking down the street and I happen to run into somebody that needs technology services. Or maybe I'm going real old school. I used to do this, and maybe in my younger days when I was selling candy in Boy Scouts land, it's like, hey, door to door popcorn and candy sales, right? So, like,
Yeah.
is that what you're referring to, and, like, in terms of the direction of traffic here?
Yeah. Yes. I think if all you are doing is just making outbound dials and there's not anything else on the front end from a marketing standpoint, it is going to be much more challenging.
Okay, so I run into this conversation rather often, other than I spend a lot of money with some effort and it just didn't result. Back to what are reasonable return on investment, metrics for my marketing spend. You know,
Yeah.
like we can talk for a long time about, hey, based on the size of your organization, this is how much money you should allocate towards marketing. Maybe we'll get to
Right.
that in a second. But let's say I've made that, calculation. I've decided to spend the money. Now, the next step of that, and we'll go back to step one in a second, is, well, like, what should I reasonably expect back based on my spend? So for every
Yeah.
dollar, should I expect $3 back? Like, I don't know. You like what is that for you?
Yeah, I think it depends on who you talk to and what the marketing activity is. But as a general rule of thumb, I look at 3 to 10x.
Oh, okay. So like
Okay, 3 to 10x.
$10, I'm gonna get $3 to $10 back.
Yeah. Now here's the reality, George. If you're putting in $1 and
Mhm.
you're getting 2 back, are you gonna freaking care? Like, uh,
Well,
as
I mean, if,
long
as long as I'm getting something in addition to my initial investment, I'm
correct.
probably happy. But yeah,
Yes,
I think the opposite happens a lot though. I spend a
it
dollar and I get
does.
zero back.
It does. Especially in the beginning. Here's where most MSPs I talk to are thinking far too short term with marketing.
Okay.
And I think that is where there's a disconnect, right? And it's not necessarily, anybody in particular's fault, right? But and frankly, it's probably marketers' fault because there are a lot of marketers that overpromise and underdeliver,
Fair.
right? Hey, we're gonna get you the top of page Google in 30 days. Really? Like nobody can control that. So to promise that is ridiculous. But when people hear that and then they start to believe it and then it doesn't happen, right? Goes back to what you touched on at the start, right? It sours us on it. And it's unfortunate that that happens. But the reality is, marketing is not a short term, one and done thing.
Yeah.
If you want to be successful with it, you've got to think long term,
Hmm.
and it needs to be something that you do consistently over time. You know, now that's
That's
not to
key.
say
That's a
that there
key. That's a
aren't,
key. In my opinion, that's actually a very key word. Like if we walk away at the end of this and say, what did you get away from it? Like the word consistency. I don't care if you're in a sales, or lead gen, prospecting, marketing role. The inconsistency is what breaks almost all of that.
yeah,
Like in my experience, hey, you met with someone. Did you follow up with them? No. Inconsistency. Hey, you started a campaign, but what was the second, third, fourth step of that? Hey, like this old school sales methodology. It's like, hey, have somebody on a call. Don't end that conversation with, well, okay, just let me know. At the end of that
right.
conversation should be, what's the next step? Where do we go from here? Right? Like what,
Yeah.
can we set the next call? Like, what do you need to do? When should we make the next interaction point? And like, don't let go of that until the next part's set, right?
Yeah.
Um, uh, Even though that's not a new theme, that still applies on the marketing side now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You've gotta, too many people give up before they've given it the opportunity to actually work.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then it's like, oh, well, I tried that. It didn't work. Well, how long did you do it? What happened? Um, we have to think at it from a long-term perspective because look, the reality is marketing is all about testing. Like a lot of things you do from a marketing standpoint are not going to work.
Hmm.
That's okay. Right. But it's, if you don't put things out there and test them, you're never going to learn and you're never going to figure out what's going to work for you.
So this is like baseball, right? Like if you're hitting the ball 30% of the time, you're
Sure.
actually
Yes.
doing really well.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You can't put something out there and expect everything that you do from a marketing standpoint to work. That's
Yeah.
totally unrealistic. And it's never going to happen. Even the best marketers fail all the time.
Hmm.
But when they fail, they learn and they iterate, and that helps them figure out what's going to work. And when you figure out what works, it makes all the stuff you invested in that didn't work worth it. That's part of the
Okay.
process.
So like
Frankly,
fail forward.
that's what a lot of marketers won't say, right?
Yeah. It's
But that's the
interesting.
reality of marketing, right? It is a constant process of testing, measuring, and learning, and then you wash, rinse, repeat.
Okay. Free network assessment. I mean, I think I mean I see a couple hundred MSP websites a month. damn near on every single one of them. That's their pitch. I mean,
That's their next step is a
I
free network assessment.
I feel like that's their offer. That's how they think they're going to get in the door. Hey, let me come give you a free look. Does that work? Do you see that work? I mean,
Well, I mean, it could. I mean, again, to me, everything from marketing starts with your target market. Who are you serving? You know, who are your ideal clients within that market? And when you understand that, that helps dictate everything that you're going to do down the line.
fair. I,
So,
I
you
feel,
know,
but I'm
if
going
your
to
market,
pause you. I feel like most MSPs aren't vertically targeted. Like they're
they're
generalists
not.
and they kind of just go, hey, I don't care what industry you're in, like
Yeah,
I'll work with anyone. And then like it's too vague from a who am I targeting?
I agree 100%. Um, I I think the simplest way for MSPs to really hone in their marketing efforts is to focus on specific verticals. It's
Hmm,
not the only way, but it is the simplest way, in my opinion, to hone in on your market and to start differentiating. Because a lot of MSPs struggle to differentiate themselves.
yeah,
And when you struggle to differentiate, you look the same. And when you look the same, what are people going to default to?
price.
Exactly. They default the price. And nobody, I mean, it sucks, dude. Nobody wants to compete on price. When you hone in on a specific vertical, you become a specialist, you can speak their language. And frankly, over time, you're going to be able to charge more because you're specialist, right? Who makes more? Your general practitioner or the freaking heart or brain surgeon, right?
Brain surgeon.
Yeah, way more because
Less
they're
cases,
specialists.
more money.
Yeah. So to me, I think there's a lot of additional benefits outside of just your marketing in honing in on a specific vertical, right? Because you can narrow down your tech stack offering, right? Your implementing and onboarding becomes more efficient
Hmm.
and it's easier to service long term. I think you can be a lot more profitable if you do that long term.
Okay.
But
So you deal with a lot of MSPs, right? From a marketing perspective, right?
mhm,
That's what you do. You're a consultant.
yeah,
Where do you see the concentration in verticals?
oh, it's all over the place. But I would say it um tends to fall more into professional services,
Hmm.
right? So, accountants, attorneys, those types of folks.
Hmm.
But really, when I start with the client and we're looking at, hey, do you have opportunities to focus on a specific vertical?
Hmm.
What we look at is your existing client base. Who are you working with now? And
I feel
who do
like
you
single digits across every category. Yeah.
Well, it could be, right? And sometimes this is not like you go through this process and it's not black or white.
Yeah.
There's gray often, and we need to make decisions based on that, right? But it's I think you want to sit there and look at your existing client base and go, look, who do you love working with? Who's profitable? And who are you getting great results for?
Those are
It's
actually
those
three
if
very good questions.
Yeah, if you can work with those types of clients day in, day out, you're happier, your team's happier, your clients are happy, right? You're going to retain them longer, you're going to get referrals.
Mm,
So let's look at that base of existing clients and then start to go, okay, they check all three of these boxes. What do they look like? Right? Are there commonalities that are
mm,
coming to the surface here? And oftentimes, like I'm just going through this with the client right now, and they're like, yeah, well, we've got a handful of architectural clients,
hmm.
right? I did it with another MSP a month ago, and they're like, yeah, we've got a handful of attorneys
Hmm.
that we work with.
Hmm.
And I was like, well, do you love working with them? Well, I don't know. I can't say I've worked with enough of them to say that yet. Okay.
Are they profitable and do they pay their bills on time?
Yeah, right. So it's not always cut and dry,
Yeah.
but we got to make some decisions. It's like, okay, well, you've got some attorney clients you've worked with, you've had them for a while.
Hmm.
Would you feel comfortable focusing some of your efforts marketing wise and direct them specifically to this market?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I would. Okay, cool.
Yep,
Now
that
let's
makes sense.
interview them. Let's get some input so that we really start to understand
I like that.
what's happening with them. What do they love about working with you? What problems have you solved for them? Why do they continue to work with you? Right? And it's that information can drive a lot of decisions, but you touched on messaging in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
When we hear in our clients' words what it's like to work with us and how they describe us, we get a lot of really good information from them in their own words, and that can help dictate what our message should be,
Aha. I
right?
like that. So like
And
your customer becomes your message.
yes, right. I'll give you a perfect example of this, and this is not an MSP example, but this about 5 or 6 years ago, I was working with a residential siding contractor,
Okay.
and I would say contractors are messaging wise are probably not all that much different than MSPs. I mean, you go to a lot of, contractor websites and they're talking about, hey, we're the number one provider in this area, or,
Mm-hmm.
highest quality products. It's like, man, that's table stakes. Like people expect that. It's
Yes.
not a differentiator. And one of the things we did with this client was we started looking at their Google reviews. They
Mm-hmm.
had over 100 reviews,
Okay.
and we started reading through their reviews. And there was a woman there who said, the thing I loved about these guys is they treated my house like it was their own.
Oh, that's a great comment.
That's the freaking message, right? They don't, they expect the siding to be the best siding. Frankly, a lot of siding contractors are selling the same stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm a James Hardy dealer and I'm a James Hardy dealer. We're all doing the same stuff.
Yeah.
So that doesn't differentiate. But dang, when they say they're gonna treat my house like it's their own, all of a sudden, you imagine they're gonna clean up after the job. When they walk in my house, they're putting booties on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna find, like my roof had to be replaced a while ago. You know how long I found roofing nails
Oh, yeah.
everywhere in my yard? Like I got kids, you walking around in bare feet. I mean, like it's that kind of stuff. That's what you want when you have a contractor. They're going to
No,
do the
I like.
job to the nth degree, and every detail is going to be where it needs to be because it's like my house is their own. That's the message, right? And so that becomes a differentiator. It's those types of things that we're looking for when we start to interview clients and we hear in their own words what the experience of working with us is like. But that helps drive, once we've interviewed them, we can start to craft our message. And then we can also, here's another reason why I like focusing on verticals. And again, it's not the only way, but it becomes much simpler. If I'm going to focus on attorneys or accountants or architects or whoever it may be, once I know who I'm going to focus on, I've created my message. Marketing's all about targeting, right? We want to fish where the fish are. We don't want to cast a line out in the, a net in the middle of the ocean, hoping we're going to catch something, right? We want to catch the right fish. It becomes much simpler to create a list of where they are when you're narrowed by vertical. I call it an ideal client GPS. But when we look to create an ideal client GPS, going back to your example earlier, I work with small businesses that have, 50 to 80 seats and they're in this area. Okay, great. Where are they? Where do they congregate? It's too broad to create a really narrow, strong list.
Mm-hmm.
But when you say I work with accountants, all of a sudden I can start to ask myself, okay, what associations do they belong to? What conferences, events do they go to? Are there influencers in the space that they might follow? Are there podcasts they listen to, YouTube channels they follow, email lists, they belong to,
Mm-hmm.
publications they read?
You
All of a
go,
sudden,
you go where they go.
exactly, you create a list and you now have a targeted list. Are you going to go everywhere that you put on that list? No, you can't. But now you've got a targeted list, and you can say, okay, for the next 3 months, we're going to test these 2 things or these 3 things and start getting active in these areas. But at least you know when you're there, you're fishing where the fish are. You're not going to a networking event hoping that somebody that might fit your ideal client type is going to be there.
Yeah.
You know that, hey, I'm going to the local accounting association monthly meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to be there?
Accountants.
Accountants, and guess what? Guess who else is going to be there? Potential strategic partners, right? Because there's going to be other vendor partners or suppliers that are going to be part of the association as well. So you're going to meet other people that serve accountants there. But we got to be targeted, right? And that's one way that helps you be really targeted with your marketing efforts.
No, that I mean, by the way, I love what you just walked through right there. Because by the way, it makes a lot of sense. And I think, just like technology is like, you know, mysterious to the people who need technology people. Or like, hey, I'm not a mechanic, right? I can change a car battery if you put a gun to my head. But at the end of the day, like I couldn't tell you one sensor versus this manifold versus what, like,
Right.
don't ask me. Money. Let's go back to that conversation, right? Like you go back to, especially the guys who started, it's cyclical, right? Like
Yeah.
somebody's in internal IT, they get laid off, or whatever. They started to, start an MSP, right? They're like, hey, I'm working based on my knowledge. And you finally hit critical mass where you're like, I don't want to work 80 hours a week. And like, do I have enough money to actually hire the next person, et cetera, right? But when it comes to
Yeah.
marketing is like this magical hat, right? This, pull the bunny out or not, to a lot of people. And so there's a little bit of a harder road to get people to decide, yes, I'm willing to do it, and how much money am I willing to put into it, right?
Yeah.
Anything, let me give you a better analogy. Marketing to many people in this industry is like gambling.
Yep.
You go to the casino and you may win and you may lose, but like for me, and I'm not a gambling, I make wagers all the time, usually ones I know I'm going to win, but I'm not a casino guy. But like
Yeah.
for the people that are, I've and I know many, they're like, hey, if you're going to do this, right, you got to hit Vegas and make it a thing, or wherever your casinos are, go in with a number, right? Like, what is that? Like, what is the number that you can lose and not, worry about paying your bills kind of thing, right? So
Right.
like, so I think about that when we come to this topic all the time, and I'm like, well, number one, like, is your business profitable? Do you know your math? And how much money do you have, like,
Yeah.
above and beyond, like, paying your bills, right? So, like, to me,
Yeah.
I start there. But I think one of the missing components, and I want to get your opinion on this, is there is so much, like, truckloads full of vendor dollars available that go absolutely untouched every year.
Yeah.
Like, and by the way, a lot of the low hanging fruit, like smaller dollar amounts, $2, $3, $4, $5,000 type things, right? There's not a lot from a requirement standpoint to get access to that dollar amount from your vendor. Like effectively, you just didn't ask. And if you
Yeah.
did ask, the bare minimum things they're requiring you to do, which is like track your results and provide a plan, is like not hard, right? So I'm just curious from your perspective, how often you're able to help use that as an avenue to kind of make it work.
Yeah. So you're talking about getting vendor MDF
Mm-hmm.
funds. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree with you. It is often overlooked, and it's there, right? So to me, if as an MSP, if you're like, man, I don't have the funds to invest in marketing, that's the first place I would be reaching out is to my vendors,
Mm-hmm.
right? To say, hey, we're looking at, increasing our marketing efforts. What kind of support do you guys have as a
Mm-hmm.
vendor? I was actually having this conversation with a Microsoft consultant about a month or two ago. This guy specializes in helping MSPs and other IT consultants navigate the Microsoft partner
Which
ecosystem, right?
which is
He's like,
huge.
it's huge, it's all over the place, it's confusing, but he's like, man, there's a lot of MDF co-op marketing funds that are available there that people just are leaving on the table, like you said. And so he helps people with that. That is one of the first places I would look for marketing funds. But you also touched on something that I think is really important, because the most common question with marketing budgets, people go, what does it need to be? And it's a freaking loaded question, right? So if I had to answer it in general, I would say 5 to 10% of your
Your
revenue.
net or gross?
Revenue, gross revenue.
Gross.
Okay. But that depends on a lot of things. It depends on, like, where are you as a company, right? Are you more established? Are you just starting or are you looking to grow significantly? That's going to impact how much you should be investing in your marketing. The other thing, what are your goals and how profitable are you, right? The more profitable you are, the more funds you're going to have to reinvest back into the company. But if you're not profitable, like, it's going to be really difficult to invest in marketing. Personally, I think if you're not profitable enough, you need to figure out why and get that addressed first and foremost, and then come back on it. But all of those things are going to impact what you need to invest in marketing. I'll give you an example. I had a conversation with a prospect. This was probably a month ago. An MSP that they've grown to, they were like $4.5-5 million in a local market. So they've
By
done
the
a
way,
really
that's
good,
good.
right? Done a really good job of saturating their local market.
Mhm,
They want to expand into another market.
mhm.
They're spending like less than 0.5% of top line revenue on marketing. And I was like,
Wow. So I just want to be clear, right? Like on $1 million in gross, you're saying 50 to $100,000.
yep,
So on a $5 million business, okay, like you're
yeah,
talking closer to $500,000.
yeah,
And like, especially if like you're in one city, let's say I'm outside of Philadelphia, and now I want to move into North Jersey outside of New York City, which is its own little bubble before you even get into the ridiculousness of New York City, right? Like that's
right.
probably an animal. Like you're going into a whole different world.
Yeah, yeah, you are. And you gotta, if you're, look, you can expand into other markets without marketing. It's going to be a hell of a lot more challenging, and it's probably going to take a hell of a lot more time. Right. But to me, when you look at, like, if I look at a $5 million MSP
Mm-hmm.
and you're not even spending $50,000 a year on marketing, like, that's you, just because you were able to grow to a certain point by doing things a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that it was the best way to do it,
Well,
right?
no,
And
you
frankly,
hear this all the time. Yeah.
this particular MSP was in a market where there wasn't a significant amount of competition, and the competition that was there was not very good, right? You know, would they have been able to get there if they were in a more competitive market, or in a market where there were much larger competitors in the space that were coming
Harder.
in? Probably would have been a lot more challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so again, it just goes back to, I think, being realistic with what you're doing with marketing. And frankly, look, if you think it doesn't work and you don't want to invest the money, then don't. Like, I mean, that's up to you. It's your business.
Well, it's no different than an MSP convincing a prospect that they need technology
Right.
services. It's the same conversation to a large degree. Like, let me go another direction with you real quick. Like,
Yeah.
does some of the traditional marketing avenues, maybe with a twist, still work in 2024? Like, let me talk to you like billboards, digital, radio. Like I love listening to sports radio all the time. Yeah, you
Yep.
hear. Then you got AdWords across all the like
Yep.
Google and LinkedIn and Facebook, and I sometimes think some of the other platforms aren't business focused. Like I don't know how many people are buying services from TikTok ads or
Yeah.
Instagram ads or Snapchat ads, right? But like LinkedIn, I mean, business people are going there, right? Like that's a
Yeah.
pretty good chance. So while that's a little bit new, though, that's not brand spanking new, right? Like these
No.
ads have been around since the 2000s, right? So like, let me recap: billboards, magazine ads, TV, radio, ads, online ad spends. Does any of that make sense for the 5 million, 2 million, million or less at MSP?
If it's targeted, right? So let's take a look at the billboard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I think that's too broad,
Okay.
right? Going back to what I touched on before, like I think it makes the most sense to go targeted by vertical, right? If you're targeting more broadly, yeah, maybe somebody's going to drive by and see the billboard, and but I don't know. I think there are much better places to spend.
Okay.
Um, you know, you touched on magazines. But hey, if it's a magazine that my ideal clients are reading, absolutely,
Mhm.
right?
Not the airline magazine, but the
No,
association magazine.
no, right? Like if it's targeted and your ideal audience is reading it, absolutely do it. And here's the other thing too, with things like print, you can track that,
Yeah.
right? You could have, a QR code there, or you could have a specific number that they're calling. There's call tracking software out there. You could have a specific URL to track, hey, we advertised in this publication.
Yeah.
What happened? Did we get any responses? Did any of those responses turn into clients? So, I if you whatever you're going to test, determine how are we going to measure this
Mm-hmm.
and whether
Well,
it's effective or not.
okay. So there's a lot of people in your chair who have come into this space and said, well, your average cost per lead should be, or your average cost per client should be. Are those metrics that makes it matter to you? Do you even follow any of that?
I think that you want to have an idea of how much those things are costing you, right? But you also have to have additional numbers if that's going to mean anything to you,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you say, well, my cost per lead is $500,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or $1,000, whatever it is, or cost per client, and whatever the number is, okay, that's great. But you can't determine whether that makes sense for you unless you know other numbers,
Mm-hmm.
right? The most important number there is what's the lifetime value of a client for you,
Okay. That
right?
so when you're consulting and you're about to work with someone, do you help them get to that calculation?
Yes, right. And when you
What
look
is
at
your
that
average
calculation,
number that you see?
what you're it's all over, right? But here's what I'll say though, for MSPs, it tends to be high, right?
Mm.
Because people tend to stay,
Yeah.
right? They're with you longer, and they're larger dollar amounts that they're paying recurring every month.
Mhm.
But we can't look at the top line revenue. When you're looking at what I want to know is what the gross profit is
Mhm.
per client each month, and then how long do you retain them on average?
Mhm.
That's going to give you a more accurate number for what the lifetime value of a client is.
Mhm.
Once you know what that is, then you can start to look back and go, okay, our cost to acquire a client is X. Is that freaking profitable?
Mhm.
Right. But without the lifetime value of a client, the other number, who cares what the other numbers are? You don't have enough data to determine whether it means anything.
Fair. I
So,
it's interesting when you go through this exercise, maybe you go to an average, but I mean, there are entire companies that have popped up to help people understand what their profitability is on a customer by customer basis. And like all businesses, right? You take some customers on earlier on, probably weren't the best fit, but you needed to
yep.
pay the bills. And then like over time, you like got smarter and you're like, this isn't the right company that, we want this one. And then you start to like like a good portion of your customers are profitable, and then there's like another portion of your customers that are like in the middle, and then there's the other guys who are like, man, I really need to stop dealing with these guys because I'm losing. Like, so like that, I feel like there's never like, unless you know when that doesn't happen. Let's say somebody exited, they sold, and then they
Yeah.
started again, and they know now in part in opportunity 2.0, they're like, nope, we're only going to deal with this situation with this clientele under these circumstances, and they know going in that's what they want.
Yeah.
But they learned already, right? So like that's a little bit different.
But that's another reason why focusing and really honing in on who your ideal clients are
Mhm.
is important. That's another benefit of that is those numbers become much more consistent and predictable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And that's how you can then, when you know the numbers, that's how you can then start to determine like, are we getting a return on our investment for what we're doing with our marketing? Right. But until you understand the numbers, you're not going to know what the return on investment is.
I'm probably not gonna tell you anything surprising here, but if I had to guess, Tim's probably running into a lot of people that do not have these numbers figured out.
Correct. Right.
So
But it's
you're
not,
almost like a finance guru in the beginning of this operation, right? To figure out what the actual thing is.
yeah. And it's too, George, it's also like just marketing is just information overload, right? There's
Yeah.
so many different channels, so many different tactics, there's so many different people saying, hey, you need to do this or you need to do that. I think it's really important to just take a step back and keep it simple. Like
Mm.
it is so easy to overcomplicate
Mm.
things in our business, not just marketing, but when we overcomplicate things like that gets in the way of getting results. When we
Mhm.
keep things simple, it becomes much easier to implement and execute on it. And most of the time, it becomes much more effective,
I
right? Because
feel like these are opposing forces, though. Technology is complicated by its nature. Like it's not meant to be simple. It's meant to. It can. I mean, I guess it can be made simple, but like the Apple type approach, right? But like
yeah,
it's inherently a complicated story to begin with, and it's trying to solve for complicated problems.
yeah. But so let me give you an example from the marketing standpoint. Okay, people are out there talking like, "Hey, you need to set up a funnel.
Mm-hmm.
You need to have somebody opts in here for this free thing, and then they go down this path." Well, the tools that are out there, I mean, they get pretty sophisticated,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you can say, hey, somebody opts in for this free widget. If they open 5 emails out of the next 10, then I want them to go down this path.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't open any, then I want them to go down this path.
Mm-hmm.
And if the wind is blowing 5 miles to the east, they go down this path, right?
Yeah.
That is an example of making things overly complex.
Okay.
Just because you can make things complex doesn't mean that it's the best thing to do. Because the reality is, when you start to go to that level of complexity, it becomes really hard to troubleshoot where things are breaking down.
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes really hard to implement and execute on it.
Hmm. Okay, that's
The
fair.
best, right? So the
Following what you're
best
saying.
funnels are the simplest. They don't have to be 10, 15 steps,
Okay.
right? So we need to boil it down. So from the text, and look, I'm not a tech person, right? So I can't speak to it on the MSP side, but think about the tools that you guys are implementing and executing. Man, there are a lot of different features that you guys can use, but the reality is like, are all of those features really important? Eh,
Yeah,
you
I,
know,
I agree.
so it's, looking like, do we really need this to do this? Or can we keep this simple and still have it be very, very effective? I challenge most people that keeping things as simple as possible is still going to make things extremely effective.
That's fair. And to be honest with you, you kind of you're not. I think you are an uphill battle because technology people are usually they go down the rabbit hole, they get stuck in the weeds, whatever analogy you want to use, right? Like
Right.
they get into like very minute details, and it's like, dude, like let me bring you back to reality here, right? Like we're getting too far down an area that we're wasting time on, and it happens all the time, and to the point where it's like paralysis by analysis kind of
Yeah.
thing. It's like, come on, let's get the job done. Like let's stop getting hung up here.
Yeah. Well, look, here's another example. We started talking about target market and your messaging, right? The the fundamentals, the principles of marketing, they don't change. It doesn't change in anything,
Hmm.
right? The fundamentals of, well, you're a big football fan, right? You like the Eagles.
Mm-hmm.
The fundamentals of a quarterback dropping back and throwing a pass, the fundamentals of doing that well are the same. They don't change.
Sure.
Same with marketing, right? So when I talk about keeping things simple, it's about focusing on the fundamentals that don't change first and foremost, because that lays the foundation for you to be successful.
That's
What
fair.
most MSPs do is they jump right to the tactics.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I need to have a website. I need to be on Facebook or I need to be on LinkedIn without actually having the fundamentals in place. And when I
Yeah.
talk about strategy, when I talk about strategy with marketing, what I'm really looking at are the fundamentals of marketing.
Hmm.
That that's the fuel, right? That's the fuel for the marketing vehicles you choose. So if you just say, hey, I got to have a website, awesome, that's a marketing vehicle. But if you have no fuel for that vehicle, it's not going to work.
Yeah. No,
And that's what most people are doing is they're jumping into vehicles, but they have no fuel.
fair.
And they're like,
No,
why
no,
is this not working?
I use the analogy, right? It's because the person next to them is doing it, right? Like, the guy across the town is doing it. The guy I met at the event's doing it. The guy in my peer group's doing it. And like, if they're doing it and they're successful, then if I just replicate what they're doing, maybe I'll be successful too. Like, this is no different than when somebody comes and was like, "Hey," like, and this happens in MSP land all the time. It's like, hey, you mind give me a copy of your contract? And then they just try to
Yeah.
like, this isn't one of these things where you just cross the names out, guy. Like,
Yeah.
you should consult with someone because the way that you do business may be completely different than the way I do business, and like that makes a difference. But like this happens all the time. So like the other problem is, to your point, right? The guy who they look across, the town with may already have the pieces you're talking about planned, right? They've
Right.
set the foundation and they're 2, 3, 4 steps like down the line. And like
Yeah.
the person, Xeroxing the idea has none of that. They're just saying, hey, if they do it, I'm going to do it. I'll get
Yeah.
this. What do I got to lose, right?
Yeah. And so you got to be careful. You don't want to copy people, right? It's okay to model
Mm-hmm.
things, model frameworks and things that have been proven to work. But yeah, it's a perfectly valid point, right? Is everybody's at slightly different places. And
Yeah.
just because that worked for them doesn't necessarily mean that if you just take it and copy it, it's going to work for you. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's another challenge too within the marketing space, not just in the MSP space, but marketing as a whole is, everybody's like, hey, we've already got all the templates and the tools that you need. And they think, oh, great, I can just put my name and logo on this and away I go. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
And that's the problem is people they think it's an easy button. And it's like, cool, I can get all these templates and all the stuff that I'm going to need. And I just put my stuff in there. This is going to be great. It's going to work. And then it doesn't work. And they're like, why? Well, because you got to make this your own. You got to look at your particular situation, who you're targeting, what your goals are, and adapt these things for you. You can take the base and the framework and the model and the methodology that works, but you
Mm-hmm.
got to make that your own. You can't just stick your logo on it and send it out. It doesn't work.
Well, but hold on. For every go back to vendors, right? Everyone's like, oh, here's the brochure. Put your logo on it. Here's
Yeah.
the this. Put your logo on it. Here's the template. But that's all. Honestly, that's all I see out there. I mean, nobody.
Yeah, and that's why but it doesn't work. So, it's like, I mean, George, we could go down a whole nother conversation about like vendor provided sales and marketing materials for MSPs.
Mm-hmm.
Like nobody buys from you because it goes back to my earlier example of the James Hardy, siding contractor, they're all buying James Hardy, right?
Mhm.
For the most part, I mean, okay, so you do Google, you do Microsoft, take your pick. They're not buying from you because you sell that stuff. They're buying from you because of what you do
Yeah.
and the results and the outcomes that you help them get. So when you get a flyer from a vendor pitching their stuff that's talking tech and you give it to a client who's at a level 2 when it comes to tech, it's foreign, right? They might, it's like it's a foreign language. They're like, I don't get it. So to me, the vast majority of those materials are a complete and utter waste of time. They don't do anything.
That's my second take. I mean, there's a lot of takeaways in this session. It's actually pretty good, but that's one of my takeaways from this session. That like you can go to every portal and download every document, slap every logo you want, but sounds like it don't work.
Because that's not, think about how your clients buy and why they buy from you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you. I mean, I've never talked to an MSP who was like,
But,
oh,
but
I got this client because I sell this particular vendor.
but some of the household name like Microsoft, Apple, Google, right?
Yeah,
People know these brands, right?
they
So like
do.
there's some cachet to that. No, I mean,
I think there's some, I think there's some credibility and brand transfer there. But again, like the vast majority of MSPs could stick those logos on their website, right? So if
not
we're all doing it, it's not a differentiator
all
anymore,
the same. Yeah.
right? And so it's the when somebody works with an MSP, they're buying the outcome, right? They're buying the solution to that business problem. They're buying into how you solve that problem, right? Like what's the process you take people through to get from where they are to where they want to be, right? They're buying you. They're not necessarily buying the 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 stuff behind the scenes,
Sure, sure.
right?
No,
Whether
that
it's
I mean, there might be a couple of brands that are important. Like if you were to go do that exercise you did where you talked to the customer and you just said, "Hey, here's a list of companies, technologies.
right.
Circle one that recognize." I'm sure there's two, three ish, four, that they're like, "Oh yeah, I know this and I know that." You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
you went through that exercise. I'm sure some of those might bubble up, but to your point, then what? Like, what's the next part of that? You
yeah.
know, just putting the vendor logo doesn't actually. Yeah, I'm
It doesn't do
authorized.
much.
Like, okay, what does that mean, right? Like,
Yeah.
registered as a partner.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
so I
So
get what you're saying. So like some of this is just working from real data so that you can then decide what to do next. And I think what I gathered from this session was, hey, if you're just shooting by the hip and there isn't a plan and you don't really have the information to measure and even understand what the results of that measurement even mean, like you're like, hey, we talked about, hey, these metrics are great, but without other data, what does that actually do for you? Like it doesn't mean anything. So like you know, if anything, at the MSP really needs to sounds like when they look at marketing, almost need to look back in the mirror, right? When they go to a prospect and say, hey, based on what you said and me looking at what you're doing, you need this, this, and this. How do you justify that? It's the same, very similar track to, well, as a business trying to grow or get more clientele or even just increase business from existing clientele, you need to do
yeah,
this. Well, like it's a very similar track.
it is. It's very similar, right? It's one
But
of the
it's
things I say is hope is not a marketing strategy,
yeah, huh, that's a great line.
right? Like we got to have a plan. We got to have a strategy in place and then we got to execute on it and we're going to learn from that,
Yeah.
right? But a lot of MSPs are very data driven people,
Oh yeah, for
right?
sure.
But they struggle on the marketing side to track the right data so that you can make, because when you have the right data, you can make strong decisions,
Yeah.
right? As to what you need to do. With marketing, we just need to boil down to what are the important metrics,
Mhm.
and then we need to track them. And from there, we're going to be able to make good decisions about what's working, what's not, what course corrections do we need to make moving forward.
Yeah, no, I 100% am tracking what you're saying. And quite frankly, I've said it a couple times in this session. I'm going to say it again. This conversation is very like just like mysterious to many people in this, vertical, right? MSP IT services land. They're just like, there's like a disconnect for some reason between this and like what they're doing. But in reality, there's a heavy overlap.
Mhm.
But they need to spend the time to get the right information in place in order to actually do it correctly.
Yes.
And like I'm not surprised now that we've gone, it's our second time talking, but I would think a lot of the people that you're trying to get to are very surprised. The beginning part of your job is helping them really understand their math.
Their math and who are they really targeting,
Mm-hmm,
right? Who do they want to target
mm-hmm.
versus who they're targeting now and how they're doing it.
No, math's a big part of that
Yeah. Yeah.
because to your point, like back to the analogy, right? It's like, well, if this is the thing that I want the most because it is most profitable and least problematic, but I'm dealing with everybody, like back to, well, how do I narrow down to the people that actually are good clients versus just a client?
Yeah.
And math's a big part of that because if those clients are profitable and pay their bills on time and you're spending less labor costs in order to support them, trifecta.
Yep.
Um, Unfortunately, a lot of people don't have these answers. Like they haven't spent the time to get to what you're talking about here. So yeah, it sounds like there's a little bit of legwork involved, right?
Yeah.
And frankly, it's not just MSPs, any business, right? Like these
Yep.
same problems for, they're the siding contractor as it is for the MSP. So
Yeah. 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 It's not, this stuff is not easy, right? It takes work, but it can be simple, right? We can all understand this. We just need to take the time to go through the process. Um, but if we don't go through the process, then we're,
you never
just
move, you're stuck in the same place. No, I'm
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
100% with you. Tim, this was awesome. And I think you have a really great gift at taking a complex theme and like saying, hey, this doesn't have to be complicated. Keep it simple. And I know that that's not the first time everybody's heard this, right? But like executing that is different than just saying, hey,
right,
KISS. It's like, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but it doesn't exactly work that way. Well, because you're making it complicated. It doesn't have to.
right,
So
yeah,
I noticed that coming out of this call. Tim, how do people find more information about you, your program, your methodology? Maybe they want to get in
yeah.
touch, all that good stuff.
So two places. Our website, rialtomarketing.com. It's RIALTO marketing.com. I am on LinkedIn, so if you search me up there, I'd be happy to connect with you there as well. The other thing I'll make available to your audience too, George, is at revenueroadblockscorecard.com. So at revenueroadblockscorecard.com, we help clients remove 9 revenue roadblocks with marketing. If you want to know which of the 9 are slowing down your growth, that's where you can do it. Takes less than 5 minutes.
That's cool. I might
Yeah.
check that out myself. Go
Yeah.
play. Put my like check boxes in there. See what
There
happens.
you go. That's it.
Awesome, guys. This session was recorded, and we had a earlier session with Tim. You should go check both of those out. I mean, part of selecting the right person, regardless of whatever it is like, are you comfortable and do you feel like they're giving you the right information? I mean, I tell you what, I like what Tim had to say today. I would hope that most people who are deaf or frustrated even have tried and like just haven't gotten anywhere. Try something different. Let's get a different result. Maybe. Why not? Guys, you'll find the session recorded. It will be online. We'll post it on all the usual places and YouTube and podcatchers and our website, mspinitiative.com under sessions. We are one more session away from out and about in the world with block parties and conferences and all sorts of good stuff. So if we don't see you in person, follow us because we're going to be posting all the shenanigans online. So at least you'll have a little bit of FOMO. And eventually, we're going to see Tim in person somewhere, somehow. Watch.
Yes.
It's going to happen. But thank you for tuning in. And Tim, thanks for jumping on here again today. And we will catch everybody on the next one. Thanks, guys.